Thank you for that story, Christine. So, hi again. I am really excited to talk about Defiant Joy today. I also really love movies. So I want to start with, I want us to all watch a scene together. It's my favorite scene from Casablanca. Hopefully we can make it work. But just to give you a little bit of context, if you haven't seen the movie or if you haven't seen it in a minute, it takes place in Morocco in 1941 when the country was indirectly occupied by Nazis by way of Vichy France, the puppet state. It was also a haven for refugees fleeing Nazi persecution, but they weren't really safe there either. You're going to hear two songs in this scene. The first song is a militaristic German song called the Watch on the Rhine. It was a favorite of Nazi soldiers then. And the second song you're going to hear is the French national anthem. So here we go.
Yes. Plate.
This is how to get metabolic rate.
Awesome. So how great would it be if we could just sing the French national anthem really loudly at Nazis and they would just go away, right? Of course, it's not that easy. But the thing that a lot of people don't realize today about Casablanca is that it was a propaganda film. It was intended to help sell the war effort to Americans who weren't yet really convinced, even after Pearl Harbor. That scene was incredibly powerful. It was an example of Defiant Joy. We've kind of touched on this topic a lot all month. Lóre talked about the clandestine insurgent rebel clown army who go to protests with their big old clown pockets full of just dumb stuff, so that when they're inevitably arrested and searched, the police have to spend hours logging everything that they pull, like, strings of sausage links and rubber ducks, and all that has to be logged, and it just creates a big problem. And then Jane's wonderful sermon, it addressed the fears that so many of us are facing right now and the power of joy to calm them. But I know what some of you are thinking. It all sounds great, but I'd like to see the receipts. So I brought them. I brought the receipts. Let's start with Chile in 1988. The country was ruled by a brutal dictator named Augusto Pinochet. He had been in power since the US helped him overthrow Chile's elected leader in 1973. After being in power for 15 years, Pinochet allowed a referendum on his leadership. It would be a very simple vote: yes, to keep him in power, or no, to get rid of him. He was confident that he had hobbled his opposition to the point that no one could or would stand up to him. And he had good reason to think that. Throughout his reign, more than 3,000 Chileans were killed or disappeared. 20,000 were imprisoned and tortured, sometimes just for insulting him. Imagine a leader so petty that he would go after somebody just for saying something mean about him. And 200,000 people fled the country. In fact, he was so confident that he would win the vote that he even gave the opposition 15 minutes of airtime every night, which hadn't happened. He controlled the airwaves. Big mistake. So the opposition went to work. They registered more than 7 million voters. They recruited 120,000 poll watchers, and they hired an ad agency to come up with a message that was powerful enough to overcome people's fear and get them to the polls. The slogan that the ad agency came up with for the Vote No campaign was, "Chile, joy is coming. Happiness is on the way." So every night for 15 minutes, they showed silly commercials, right? Their logo was just the word no with a rainbow behind it. The commercials were just ridiculous. It was people singing and dancing, their mimes in full makeup doing like mime stuff, and people on horseback and waving flags. I mean, they were silly. And a lot of people really didn't like it. A lot of people who worked in the opposition thought that they were trivializing the horrors that people had gone through. But the ad men who worked on it, they were all men, insisted it would work. Meanwhile, Pinochet's ads, and I'm not making this up, he showed things like a steamroller crushing baby strollers, right? So all this messaging was going on. Millions of people watched all this. And then a few days before the vote, the opposition organized a demonstration. It was called the March for Joy. And I'm just going to read a little brief excerpt from the New York Times coverage because it's awesome. The crowd that marched to the rally site in southwest Santiago appeared to be in the hundreds of thousands. Popular singers, music groups, and actors, many of them recently returned from exile, provided entertainment. The crowd waved banners, cheered, and sang from the vast collection of songs written for the campaign. Songs like Chile Says No, The Imperial Waltz of the No, and Happiness is a Rainbow. And then a few days later, Chileans went to the polls. 44% voted to keep Pinochet in power, but 56% voted to expel him from office. One report the following day said, for 15 years, Pinochet's opponents have sung, "He's going to fall." Last night, they changed the words to, "He has fallen." The referendum led to a free and fair election the following year, and in 1990, Pinochet relinquished power to a new democratically elected leader. Now, the Vote No campaign in Chile is just one example of a resistance movement that uses strategic, defiant joy to accomplish their goals. The 80s were actually a really good time for defiant joy. In Eastern Europe, the singing revolution, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like, helped Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania win their independence from the Soviet Union. At one point, this is stunning to me, at one point, 2 million people joined hands and formed a 420-mile-long human chain through all three countries. It worked. In America, queer rights activists were harnessing the power of joy to call attention to the AIDS crisis. This beautiful person here is a fantastic drag artist named Patagonia. Patty is a climate activist who uses drag to educate, entertain, and empower people to join the environmental movement. In 2025, she became the very first person to deliver a TED Talk in full drag. Her talk was called "Why Joy is a Serious Way to Take Action." And it's fantastic. You should look it up and watch the whole thing, but I'm going to read an excerpt. She said, "Since the birth of the queer rights movement, drag performers and trans people have always been on the forefront of organizing and protesting and community building. When queer people were beaten in their homes, put in jail just for existing, when we had the statistics and the facts on the millions of queer people suffering from AIDS, yet no one was joining our fight, drag performers turned pain into joy. And here's the key part. In doing so, welcomed millions more people to fight with us. If there's one thing I have learned from the art form of drag, it's that you can take fighting for something seriously without taking yourself too seriously. Joy is a serious way to take action. Joy is strategic because joy inspires momentum. Now, you can't talk about Defiant Joy without talking about the Black community and the civil rights movement. When voting activists marched from Selma to Montgomery in 1965, they did it singing. Elaine Nichols, writing for the National Museum of African American History and Culture, described the motivating and restorative power of joy in a movement. She wrote, "Black joy is finding the positive nourishment within self and others that is a safe and healing place. It is a way of resting the body, mind, and spirit in response to the traumatic, devastating, and life-altering racialized experiences that Black people continue to encounter. So bring on the joy." Joy then gives us energy. It brings us together. It gives us the will to fight. Joy is sacred. It grows our coalition by inviting people in, and it can even erase the boundaries that separate us. There's a phenomenon called own race bias, or the cross-race effect. It can make it hard for people to recognize the faces of people of different racial identities. So when you hear people say, "Oh, they all look alike," that's own race bias. In 2005, a study published in Psychological Science found that higher levels of positive emotions, such as joy, predicted better recognition of Black faces and lower levels of own race bias. Studies have shown that singing together in large groups can cause our heartbeats to synchronize and our brain waves to line up. No wonder authoritarian leaders work so hard to drown our joy and replace it with fear and hate and suspicion. Joy can be dangerous to people in power. I spend a lot of time lately thinking about one of my favorite books. It's Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes. It was published in 1962, but Ray knew something about these people that we're dealing with today. He had their number. The story is about an evil carnival led by Mr. Cougar and Mr. Dark. It comes to town and it seduces people by preying on their most selfish impulses and desires. But one man, Charles Holloway, who's the library janitor, he sees through him and he figures out how to beat him. And at the end, his son, Will, who's 12 years old and is one of the heroes of the story, feels beaten and he's scared and he's crying. And Charles tells him, all these, Mr. Dark and his sort, they like crying. They love tears. The more you bawl, the more they drink the salt off your chin. Wail and they suck your breath like cats. So get off your knees, Will. Jump around, hoop and holler, shout, sing, but most of all, laugh. So if someone tells you that now is not the time to be joyful, they are wrong. If there were ever a time to be joyful, this is it. So chase joy. Grab it wherever you can. Invite it in, bask in it. Feed it, grow it, and spread it. Use it. I'm going to leave you today with a quote from author and activist named Dan Savage. And this is actually the quote that got us thinking about this message to begin with and inspired the sermon. He said, "During the darkest days of the AIDS crisis, we buried our friends in the morning, we protested in the afternoon, and we danced all night. The dance kept us in the fight because it was the dance we were fighting for. It didn't look like we were going to win then, but we did. It doesn't feel like we're going to win now, but we can. So keep fighting and keep dancing."